Please welcome Transportation Commissioner Joanne Hardesty.
I always look like and feel like a bag lady. I'm always carrying so much stuff. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for community members who've lost their lives at the hands of gun violence before we begin. Thank you for joining me in that. Oh, I guess I could take this back off. Thank you. As we all unfortunately know, Portland has continued to witness a variety of gun violence related deaths over the last year. We are still reeling from the deadly violence of 2 weeks ago, which included a person being killed in front of their own children, a police killing, and a deadly mass shooting that targeted racial justice advocates. It's all so sad and shows that we will need to address various forms of violence that continues to be on the rise, from gun violence to traffic violence to domestic violence, carefully and without a one-size-fits-all approach. We do need an all-hands-on-deck approach where every city bureau is diving in deep to be creative, to collaborate, and be part of the solution. We must stay focused on long-term solutions that address the root cause of this violence while responsibly acting with urgency to mitigate the violence in the short term. We must be smart and not reactionary. Today, we are in a neighborhood that saw an over 250% increase in 911 calls related to shootings from 2020 to 2021. This alarming, drastic increase led to this neighborhood bringing some specific ideas to the city, including a request to my office for a traffic calming intervention. Neighbors were observing high-speed traffic gun violence incidents in the area, which further endangered community members beyond shots fired to threats of vehicle violence, as vehicles sped through slip lanes and nearby residential neighborhoods. That's where I come in as Transportation Commissioner. I directed my staff in Peabody to collaborate with the local community as well as bureaus across the city to pilot a holistic violence mitigation effort. Working together with neighbors to implement their ideas, the Portland Bureau of Transportation installed a total of 18 temporary low-cost traffic barrels with a 6x6 block radius, where the combination of gun violence and related speed were most prominent. My office and Peabody were not alone. As the intervention began, a collaborative effort involving Peabody, Portland Bureau of Parks and Rec, Office of my OMF Community Safety Division, Portland Police Bureau, and community members. We knew that simple act of installing temporary traffic barrels alone was not going to make a significant impact on gun violence, and it's unfortunate some chose to ridicule this idea in that way. But here's a summary of the actions that have been taken near where we are today. Peabody placed 18 traffic calming barrels as requested by neighbors. Park and Rec increased park ranger patrol and repaired lighting in Mount Scott Park. Portland Police Bureau increased patrols to areas, enhanced collaborations with park rangers. Commissioner Hardesty's office surveyed residents in an area to capture their concerns and their ideas. City staff spoke with local businesses encouraging installation of security cameras. Later this afternoon, my office will release the data sets that helped inform our first evaluation period. Then this evening at 5 p.m., I will be hosting a virtual neighborhood forum with a panel including Mount Scott Arleta Chair Machu Williams, public health expert Dr. Jonathan Jay, and city employees that were involved with this pilot project. We will present a review of the pilot thus far and then provide an opportunity for local neighbors to ask questions and share comments. I do want to share a few points of the summary from our evaluation. For example, 64% decrease in verified shootings during the first 3 months of this pilot project following intervention that began in October of 2021 compared to the 3 months prior to the pilot project intervention. Following the intervention, gun violence went down in the neighborhood compared to the city as a whole. This decrease occurred while the rest of Portland's shooting numbers remained consistent. The Mount Scott Arleta neighborhood has seen a huge increase in shooting related 911 calls, 251% increase from 2019 to 2021. This is believed to be both due to the actual increase in shootings, but also because people are in heightened alert, leading to 911 calls reporting gun violence that then are investigated and determined to be fireworks or another loud sound. 72% of those responding to our survey were seeking solutions other than traditional law enforcement, such as youth violence prevention outreach and creating an active, positive community space. Twice as many survey respondents believe that traffic intervention reduced traffic from people escaping a shooting compared to those that didn't perceive a difference. I want to be first to caution you, however, and make it very clear. These are promising results, but we cannot determine this a success from such a small scale pilot and data set. What this data set tells me, however, is that this idea should be continued beyond the pilot at the City of Portland. I know people are scared. The amount of gun violence we have witnessed last year and so far in 2022 is unacceptable. From the data I have seen and the conversations I have had, I want to continue this pilot in Mount Scott and beyond. For my part as Transportation Commissioner, PBOT has already submitted a budget request to hire and assign a new staffer specifically to this pilot project as we are exploring additional proposals. I look forward to working with my colleagues in the upcoming budget cycle to see what a holistic gun violence hotspot intervention collaboration could look like moving forward. Now I want to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Commissioner Carmen Rubio. As she takes the stage, I want to acknowledge my staff person, Andre Miller, who was the one with feet on the ground, working directly with neighbors to try to unpack the issues that were taking place in this community and find a solution. Thank you, Andre, for your hard work on this project. I am very grateful. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. A former elected that I once worked for used to say that everybody has a role in creating a safe and thriving community, that no one is exempt. And there's no better example of this than in the great work by Machu Williams and the Mount Scott Arleta neighbors. They've demonstrated how local communities and neighborhoods and city government can work together to come up with a variety of solutions aimed at making our communities safer. And as elected officials, it's our job and our role to be responsive to what our city needs, a broader, more centered community safety ecosystem that better meets the needs of these changing times. And getting there takes a comprehensive approach. and it includes better management of our 911 system, along with the right mix of first responders, investments in community-based organizations to do intervention work with those involved in and affected by gun violence, and investments to prevent situations from escalating, such as what our park rangers do daily. Today, we're showcasing yet another element to what a comprehensive approach includes: traffic barrels and other calming measures, better lighting in parks, and more friendly, well-informed park rangers acting as the eyes on the ground, capable of de-escalating situations and making people feel welcome and safe in these vital community spaces, which is why I'm requesting more funding as part of our annual budget process. Following the council's increased investment last spring in our park ranger programs, rangers made over 2,600 26,000 positive contacts with park rangers, with park goers, and handled 8,000 contacts for park rule violations and nuisance issues across the cities. And the good news is that the rangers only required Portland Police or Portland Fire in only 2% of rules issues. So we can see that this example of differentiated response has some very promising indicators. And like Portland Street Response, rangers are helping to ensure Portland Police and Fire are able to focus on higher need public safety matters. In addition, last March, Portland Parks and Recreation completed a multi-year pilot project to convert older, obsolete lighting to LED lights at 8 different locations in East and North Portland. And these bright, new, lower energy lights both improve visibility and save the city thousands of dollars a year in energy costs. So this is a public safety win, and it's also a win for a resilient city and also a win for taxpayers. And in conclusion, I want Portlanders to know that your city commissioners are doing all we can to support or to respond to the gun violence epidemic. And that includes making sure we have the right, mix of responders. It ensures that we have and are operating at full capacity, and it's also about investing in violence intervention, violence prevention, and community-centered solutions like what we're looking at today. So thank you again to the neighbors of Mount Scott, Arleta, Matthew Williams, Parks, and PBOT for this wonderful collaboration.
Thank you, Commissioners Hardesty and Rubio. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Williams. I am a staff member at Southeast Uplift Neighborhood Coalition, but I'm here today not in that capacity, but just as a neighborhood volunteer with the Mount Scott Arleta Neighborhood Association, current chair. And so I just also really want to thank the staff of Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Rubio, for being so cooperative and collaborating with the community on solutions when we were in a really tough place last summer. For context, I live within a block of 72nd and Woodstock. And so when these gunfire incidents were happening at night, neighbors and I would be up at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night texting each other. We're talking chain texts of 10 to 12 different neighbors, all being like, what can we do? I'm going outside, check there's bullet holes in my house or in my apartment. I even had neighbors saying they were hiding their children in their bathtubs during these extended gunfire exchanges. Absolutely terrifying. And we've welcomed, and we came together or collaborate on what solutions could happen, but we wanted to make sure that it was an equitable one. So we're talking households led by members of communities of color. We're here in these talks about what we could do that wasn't a reactive carceral solution. And so we came up with some real concrete asks, and I think that's what led to this initial pilot project, was something that could be delivered, something to mitigate the gunfire and the reckless driving that would occur and create secondary threats to community safety as cars sped away out of the neighborhood. And so we asked many different things, including the barrels. And so this is a community ask, and we're just thrilled that the Office of Commissioner Hardesty and PBOT could collaborate and make that happen. But this really was a multi-bureau approach. We had asked of the Parks and Recreation, Lighting, Civic Life. And I just want to give a shout out to Civic Life, because they actually came out, one of the first bureaus to come out and work with us on crime prevention through environmental design to make some improvements to the Tremont Church there at 72nd and Woodstock. You can see there's barricades leading into that park. that was really instrumental in preventing some of the late night exchanges and violence that emerged in that location. So thank you to all the bureaus and just for responding to the community. And we hope that other parts of Portland can enjoy similar benefits and they can like take the successes of this, replicate it elsewhere, and build off these successes as being like cost-effective investments in community, including our community programs in Portland parks. So I will just say it's been immense, the difference between what we were experiencing last summer and what we're experiencing today. We're talking gunfire 5 nights in a row. And then after the barrels went up, it was one like every 5 weeks. Like the ratio of actual confirmed gunfire exchanges just plummeted after this initial program and the investments in the community. So we hope that this could be a lesson for other communities elsewhere in the city, that smart strategic investments in community can have profound effects on our livability, safety, and create thriving neighborhoods throughout Portland. So with that, want to turn it over?
All right, we've got 10 minutes. We'll take a few questions. We prefer questions that are focused on the pilot project. If anybody wants to take it off, we'll do hands. We'll go very old-fashioned here. KGW.
Yeah, Commissioner Hardesty, you hinted, and you'll release, I guess, some numbers later today. You referenced when you're hinting at the success. I'm curious, how much of that do you think, a dip in gunfire is the pilot project or our understanding that police have beefed up patrols in this area?
I will say it is all of the above. It is having more park rangers visible in the community. It's the community feeling safe to be able to walk in their neighborhood and be able to convene in their public space, right? It's a combination of everything. Everybody has a role in reducing gun violence, and police have a very specific role as well, right? But I say this as we've articulated today, this has been an all hands on deck effort, and every piece has made a difference. I would not say the barrels by itself stopped anything bad from happening, but it was the community coming together saying, if we all work together, we can figure this out.
What do you say to community members who say it's not working? We jumped out of the car and people flagged us down right away saying, this isn't working. What is she doing today?
Actually, the lady that stopped while we were at the earlier place was actually saying thank you.
No, I meant other people.
Well, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We're here today to celebrate a community that came together and said, what can we do as community members to solve this problem, right? And I am proud that the community actually had the solutions. It wasn't us, right? But what I also am proud of is that PBOT was very responsive, as they always are, to creative ideas from community, right? The thing is that my office can't come to every community and have this one-on-one interaction, right? But I use the bureaus that I have in my portfolio to actually address the critical issues that we're facing today, right? And this is a fine example of the Parks Bureau, fine example of the Police Bureau, fine example of Fire and Rescue, all playing a role, right? But the number one factor was the community first. Was like, wait a minute, we think if we do this, we think if we get more lighting, right? I'm proud that we listen. At City Hall, right? You hear all the time, City Hall doesn't listen to the people, right? Neighbors here are saying, not only did we listen, we were responsive, and we tried it out, right? In fact, your station laughed at me, right? When I first put the barrels up, Channel 6, hey, I ain't mad at you, right? You guys were just having a good joke. Look at Commissioner Hardesty putting up barrels, right? It wasn't Commissioner Hardesty, it was the community saying this is one piece of the puzzle that will slow people down, right? And so I'm happy to stand here at Channel 6 and say, guess what? So far, so good. We did it.
We're 6. Think wrong. People.
Oh, it was Channel 8. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I can't see.
Sorry.
It was Channel 6 that did that, though. What's the Channel 6?
You know that there are a lot of communities that are experiencing gun violence, and obviously it is not isolated within an abstract or within a neighborhood. But why this neighborhood first? Why pilot program here instead of maybe the Gilbert neighborhood where there are more shootings, there is more gun violence?
Let me just say, this isn't first. This isn't the first time my office has been on the ground working with community to problem solve, right? This pilot, because the community had some very specific ideas, right? Many times people come and say, we just need help, right? This community had been organizing themselves, talking to each other. What do we think would make a difference, right? And so when they contacted my office, which is pretty rare, right? Normally people don't contact the commissioner directly, but when they contacted my office, I sent Andre out to meet with the neighbors. They met a few times. He got more information. He engaged the other bureaus at the city, right? So it wasn't anything magical, except the community thought that if we put these little pieces in place, they thought it would make a huge difference. And as you've heard today, the community thinks it's made a huge difference. Please.
Can I just ask you too? I mean, you said this was a project that is 10 or decades in the making. How would you
So that comment about decades in the making would be specifically about that Pocket Park Arleta Triangle project. It's been a community effort since at least the early 2000s, and so we've been working to make that spot more safe. It's just kind of reached a critical, I don't know if you want to say breaking point, but urgency last summer when we came to Commissioner Hardesty's office requesting support, and they were instrumental in implementing our ask in the community.
and having them do what you did and getting this
Yeah.
getting this started, how realistic could this be replicated in a typical way in other neighborhoods and other districts?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we understand how difficult city budgets are to adjust once they're in place. And so we had to have kind of a nimble, deliverable ask, and that's why we had such concrete steps the community came together on, knowing the budget limitations that bureaus face. And so I think in terms of like applying to critical hotspots, if you will, throughout the city is possible. And if we plan for this in the next budget cycle, we can make that happen and invest in communities throughout Portland where like they have a more urgent need for these kind of investments. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
What was that question again?
Like, how is it realistic to get this in the next budget cycle? How Portland are you going to start implementing?
So what I would say is I would hope that communities would do just like this community did, right? Talk among themselves and figure out what are the patterns that they're noticing, right? People who live in the neighborhoods are much more observant of things that are not normal taking place in their neighborhood. Um, I would say that it will take all of us, right? Like this worked in this neighborhood because this neighborhood understood the neighborhood needs, right? Other neighborhoods this might not work in. They may have other tactics and strategies that they need to develop that will be more effective in their neighborhood, right? Where I live, the biggest killer of people is vehicle violence, right? Because I live in high crash quarters where people drive like they're like on a freeway through neighborhoods. And so for me, violence looks different in my neighborhood. And I think most community members have a different level of violence based on what they're experiencing there. And they would have some good ideas about how to fix it.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, this is kind of a question that I'm not sure exactly before, and it's kind of based on data, but I'm curious if you think or worry that, or have seen violence that maybe previously occurred here, gun violence being moved to neighborhoods nearby. Like if it's not happening here, is it happening elsewhere? And have you thought about has that been able to be tracked at all? So like where gun violence that could have been happening here has been moved out?
So let me just say, based on the data that I read, right, there is no one size fits all gun violence activity, right? Domestic violence is way up. Suicide by guns is way up. Uh, 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 stranger violence is way up, right? So we cannot have a one size fits all solution to what we know are very complex, very systemic issues, right? And so what I will continue to work with my council colleagues on is making sure we're taking a holistic approach. That we're not saying that if we do this one thing, gun violence will stop. Next week, right? We know it's going to take a lot of efforts, right? And a lot of it actually is the economic devastation that many community members are still experiencing. And so we have so many problems as a city to tackle. And being here today celebrating a small success because of community coming together, community not taking a knee-jerk reaction, community saying, hey, we think if we work together, we can actually have an impact. And so what we've seen is that we have promising information that in fact when neighbors and city hall and community work together, we get great outcomes. Thank you again all for being here. Really appreciate it. Oh, one more.
One last question, and we'll go to Liz.
Yeah,
Liz, the point.
my question is for both commissioners. How do you know that it was the traffic barrels that stopped the gun violence? Can you explain why you think it was the traffic barrels and what they were supposed to do to stop it?
That is more of a question. Where's my Peabody expert? She wants to know what is the value of the barrels as compared to some other things we could have done. No. So the question, I think, if I hear correctly, is why the barrels? The barrels actually were to slow down traffic, right? Because people were speeding through, right, after they shot the weapons, right? So that was the reason, right? And it was temporary and expensive.
Are you planning on expanding that to other areas, and what would that take? The traffic barrels.
Possibly. Again, that's why we want a staff person that will be actually charged with working directly with community to create interventions that work in different communities, right? One of the things I love about this intervention is my desire to continue to create open spaces in community where community members can gather, right? And we have one, but the community can't use it before because of the cars speeding through, right? Every community has this unique characteristics. Every community knows what they need to feel safe, right? So my job isn't to come in as Peabody Commissioner and say, we're going to put barrels in your neighborhood, right? My job is to say, how do we help? How do we partner, right? What do you need from us? And within the limited resources we have, how can we be most responsive? Thank you.